Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. I'm Bernie Martin Beck, and I get to talk to the most fantastic people here in the state of Jefferson. Well, it all started with a video that I was watching the Sunday morning show, and I heard about a submarine. And of course I was interested, and then I was in Medford and someone said, well, right here is the man that knows the whole story. Join me and meet Doug. Last name is?
DeVine.
That's a nice name. Doug, what's your connection with, well, this world-class story of submarines?
Well, it's a little bit of fate involved. I own a surveying equipment company in Medford that you visited, and we had kind of the start of the whole story was that we had sell a lot of stuff to the federal government, and on the downsizing of some of the governmental contracts, some equipment became surplus and ended up in Charleston, South Carolina in a historical fund for a group to set up for preservation of a submarine that Clive Cussler had discovered off the coast of Charleston. It was called the H.L. Hunley.
Now, this is, I mean, if I'm drawing a picture of this is East Coast, West Coast.
East Coast, West Coast, that's right. And everybody on the East Coast says, well, how come you guys got into that?
Well, and what is your business?
Well, we sell surveying equipment.
Modern surveying
equipment, exactly.
But you have a few treasures
we do have
from
some old
what
treasures.
era? What is surveying history?
Surveying history basically started with the Egyptians. I mean, it's...
So George Washington was right in line there, okay.
Yeah. So what happened was one of our desks or one of my business cards had been glued in the bottom of a drawer of a desk from somebody from Bath Iron Works, which is a ship manufacturer. And they had surplus that equipment, and it ended up in Charleston at the Friends of the Hunley, because they knew they had this submarine. They hadn't recovered it yet, but they knew where they were gearing up for it. And Harry Pecorelli, who, by the way, his dad moved to Shady Cove, he said, you know, we need some measuring equipment, some pocket tapes and some plumb bobs and just little stuff. And he opens his drawer, and there's my business card, which
just happened to look like
just
this.
Happened to be
bright yellow
bright
business
yellow
card with the points of the compass here.
Yes, indeed. So he said, heck, I'll call these guys. And he called me up, and our secretary said, there's some guy that found a Civil War submarine and he wants to talk to you. I said, yeah, right, get out of here. So Harry called me.
A sunken
Civil War submarine.
They didn't have submarines in Civil War, did they?
They did indeed.
The rest of the story.
The rest of the story. So I talked to them, and I asked them, I said, you have what? He said, we've located a submarine, as far as we can tell, that is completely sealed, so the crew should still be on board. It was just a moment in history that had been preserved through a naval accident. And they asked if, you know, I said, you're going to do what with it? And they said, well, we're going to measure it. And it just sounded kind of strange. And we had some really high-tech equipment, so I said, hey, why don't you let us show you what we can do. So we just hopped on an airplane and off we went, and that was the start of a 5-year odyssey.
Because they didn't expect it to...
No, archaeology had no idea that you could do what we could do, which we use it in oil refineries and manufacturing and other, and no one had ever approached archaeology with it.
So technology in Medford.
Yes.
I mean, did it start in Medford, or?
We were some of the first people to develop this new technology called LIDAR. I had heard about it. We're very interested in new products, and I mean, we were the first to have global positioning systems, which now everybody has. We sold the first system to George Weyerhaeuser, I guess, in about 1990.
So you're saying we as the professional...
We being the company.
Medford is kind of the hub for this technology then?
We're pretty well known, yes. in the technology industry.
And you're driving down Jackson,
Yep.
right? And there on your
Right hand, no, actually it's on Riverside.
Okay.
On the right-hand side is good old Pacific Survey.
And in there is all this history. I was so excited. The Hunley, somehow, I didn't know there were submarines. I didn't know that, I mean, Civil War is where my family history starts in this country. Tell me about this.
Well, the Hunley was built by, well, first of all, the Hunley itself was developed to break the blockade during the Civil War of Charleston, South Carolina. It was built by the Confederates. Its designer, Horace Hunley, actually sunk with it at one time and died. The Hunley has killed more people than it did, I mean, killed them on its own, not because of warfare, but just it kept sinking. And
Oh, more than once?
oh yes, it sunk 3 times, and they recovered it each time.
And dried it out
And took, lost everybody on board every time.
Put a new team on and...
And off they went again. They were...
Where'd you find that history?
Since we found it, there was a tremendous amount of research that's been done. It's all funded by the Friends of the Hunley, which is a volunteer organization. But we went back there and showed the conservators and the archaeologists, because they were kind of disbelievers. They didn't think we could do what we told them we could do, and we really didn't know if we could do it either.
Bluff.
But it was a pretty tremendous challenge. The submarine was built in secrecy. It was a military secret. There were no drawings, no plans. So what we had was seriously a moment of history that
buried in water. How deep?
Time capsule was in 30 foot of water. It was sunk in, because Charleston Harbor is very, very, very shallow. And when the submarine went down, it went into the silt. It's got about a 12-foot silt layer, and it went anaerobic, no oxygen. Basically, the temperature of the seawater is 50 degrees, a saline solution, so an excellent preservative. And
the people that were in it, that was it.
They were
no
done.
air, that's
Right.
it.
And everyone knew of the Hunley, but no one knew where it was. Excuse me. And Clive Cussler, who is a writer, funded a project. He likes to look, he's called Sea Hunters. He likes to look for ships and historic craft. And he actually used some modern day computers and figured out what the tide table was, because this was cranked by hand. It was man-powered. And,
Okay, now, cranked, that's at the end of it was some propeller, or?
There was a propeller, and there was 8 guys on board, 1 captain, and 7 guys on the crank, and each person that manned one of the crank stations would actually put his legs against the bulkhead and pull 55 degrees, and he did that with 7 guys, and that's 360 degrees. And they could hit about 4 knots. So they went out to attack the blockade, and they picked the flagship, which was the USS Housatonic, which was a 1,200 ton, very big steam sail powered flagship. And they rammed a 90-pound charge into it, and then backed off. And there's some question of how it was detonated. Common theory right now is that it was pulled with a trigger. But we found, on our last visit, we found a coil of wire and a crude battery, so we think it might have been electrically detonated. And the 90-pound charge detonated, and there was a massive explosion because Lieutenant Dixon, who was the captain of the Hunley, actually inadvertently hit the powder magazine, and 8,000 pounds of black powder went up and literally broke the ship in half.
Broke
the Housatonic in half, and the Hunley signaled shore with a lantern that they had successfully broken the blockade. and then it disappeared in history. That was it.
They never got their applause.
Oh yeah, a constant, but they were lost.
So what do we have here?
Well,
That's what it looked like?
Yes, that's a life-size. What we do is we used a product called LiDAR, which is a scanning system that we basically build a three-dimensional model, and we do that with accuracies of about 3 millimeters. So that is very, very small. So that is an actual one-to-one three-dimensional model of the H.L. Hunley that we printed. And we basically raised the bar in our archaeology, because this is the first time in history. Archaeology is a very destructive science, that when you excavate something, it's done. You can't go backwards.
Right.
With this, we could actually take it apart digitally and then reassemble it digitally. And matter of fact, our last, in March, we're going back again to do some of the interior components. They want to remove them and then put them back exactly as they were. And
The reason for that is?
well, for preservation. The goal is to actually take the Hunley and reproduce it. Or actually, when we, for example, the only way, the Hunley has two entrances, and that was the forward and aft hatch, and they were only 18 inches across.
Oh.
So to get in and excavate and do archaeological studies, you couldn't do it through an 18-inch hole. So we used radiography and x-rayed the hull to find how the rivets were put in place. We found that it was put together with plates. And we mapped out where we wanted to go into it and remove what's called concretion. Concretion was actually what saved the Hunley's life, because as an artifact, iron, when it's exposed to seawater, has a naturally occurring product called concretion. It's like an eggshell. So basically you have a submarine that is completely encased in an eggshell.
Okay.
So what we did was, after we realized that we have to get into it, figured a plan to get into it, removed the concretion, drilled and removed the rivets that held the, because there was no welders back then. This was all riveted and bolted.
Right. Now you're telling me that you went in and removed a panel
Yes.
and dropped your cameras.
Well, no, it was actually filled with silt. In the 135 years, it had slowly leaked with very silty water, and the silt had settled out and more had come in, which was great because that actually acted as a preservative and encased the bodies, and everything, clothing, shoes, all of your pocket change and pocket knives and watches.
Well, that's what you're showing here, isn't it? What's this?
Well, that's a dog tag that we found on one of the sailors on board. There was some discrepancy as to why that was there, because he was not on the ship's manifest.
Oh.
And we found out that his name is Ezra Chamberlain, and he was actually a Connecticut Yankee. But again, if you realize that this was a military secret, why would they not have spies? People that were involved with funding, which were mostly from the South, didn't care to hear that there was a Yankee on board. So that was kind of.
Isn't it interesting, the editing that goes on
yes.
with history?
There was a little bit of editing.
Now, what is that one?
That was there was a story, and this again, a bit of the military Navy drinking boys, as they all are, the submariners. There was stories that Lieutenant Dixon had a girlfriend in Mobile, Alabama. Her name was Queenie Bennett, and Queenie and George were lovers, and she always wanted George to be able to get back to her. So the story goes that she gave George Dixon a $20 gold eagle so that he would always have it, and he could always find his way back to her. So George Dixon was in the Battle of Shiloh, 1862, and he supposedly took a .58 caliber mini ball hit to the groin, which theoretically would have hydrostatically shocked. I mean, he would have died. But luckily, as the story goes, it hit the gold coin, ricocheted off, and saved his life. And supposedly George Dixon saved that little
Lucky
gold coin, and that was the story. Well, no one ever knew because no one has ever been in the Hunley. Maria Jacobson, who was the senior archaeologist of the project, was removing George Dixon's body block. Everything was removed in sections so we could map and know where everything was. And she put her hand under the body block and she felt, with surgical gloves, but you can still really feel, she said, you know, I feel something here. And it was the ribbed edge of a coin. And she actually pulled on it, and out came the exact coin.
And where'd the story come from?
Well, no, that story had been around. I mean, forever. No one knew that it really existed. Everyone thought it was just a story. And she actually found it. And then when we took, and it's being gold, it has no degradation at all. I mean, it looks as good as the day it was produced. And as she squirted it off, she said, look what it says. And it says 1862, Shiloh, 1862, my life preserver, GED, George E. Dixon. He actually had it engraved.
Oh,
and that was...
so the story is affirmed.
The story is affirmed, and that is probably one of the most valuable, that is the most valuable Civil War artifact that there is, period.
And the most valuable coin.
Yes. And what happened, that coin was entrusted to Senator Glenn McConnell as its caretaker, and even today no one knows where it is. There was a reenactment of the Battle of 1862 at Shiloh, and the Shiloh people said, hey, that were sponsoring it, said, we'd love to display the gold coin. So Senator McConnell said, boy, that'd be great, we'll do that. So it was all set up, and as time went on, Senator McConnell said, you know, boy, that is the coin, and what would happen if I entrust it to someone and it gets stolen or gets lost? So it was...
so they duplicated it in...
So what they did was they duplicated it, they gold-plated it, and they put this gold-plated, absolutely perfect replica up with Brinks guards on either side, and everyone was taking pictures of it. And
you and I know, and all of our viewing audience knows...
that I have the replica.
Oh!
Which I have right over there. So.
Oh, good. Well, we'll cut that right in so everybody gets to see it. Now, that's a repeat of this.
Yeah, these are all what we call scans that have been digitally put together, and they are false colored. We use that to analyze the materials that are that were used in the construction process. So again, this whole technology is used to archive, record. When I mentioned about drilling out the rivets, the extent that this is being conserved is that we would actually take magnetic devices and catch the chips that came off of the rivet they were drilling out, and they would all be they will be, when it's in full conservation, be reconstituted into that exact same rivet and put right back into the exact hole.
So. The kid in me wants to go there.
Oh yeah, well it's, when they opened the Hunley up for viewing, they actually crashed the Ticketron. They said, okay, we're going to let the public come in. You're going to buy a $10 ticket, but we're going to let you look at it. And the day that they announced it, they overloaded the Ticketron internet site and just crashed it.
And made history right there.
Exactly. It was one of the most sought after. I mean, they were scalping tickets for the Hunley.
Oh, I would just love to see this. Tell me about what's it meant to you?
Well, it's actually been the start of a pretty long odyssey. What happened was we were the first people, and everyone keeps saying, why you? I mean, what
why Medford?
Why Medford? What happened to everybody else? Well, it's a very, very small community that that works in historic craft, especially submerged craft. The fact that we were involved with this with National Geographic's There was a fight between National Geographic and the Discovery Channel to see who would donate the most money to get this thing all launched. So
Launched, it takes a different meaning,
yeah, different meaning,
because
correct, yeah.
you're not talking about the launching of the ship,
No,
but
launching
the
of the
launching
project.
of the research.
Of the research, right.
Okay.
So National Geographic's, we became involved with National Geographic's. Well, then the Discovery Channel naturally heard who's doing what, so they jotted our name down. We then worked with...
Someplace in Medford,
yeah,
Oregon.
someplace in Medford, Oregon. They then, we worked closely with the Smithsonian. So the Smithsonian says, who's doing all that work down there? Oh,
Somebody in
Medford,
Medford, Oregon.
And we pretty much started to really, associate with Clive Cussler and, Ballard and
These are the big boys
yeah,
who have the...
everybody that's involved in underwater historical research. And we got involved with the Vancouver Maritime Museum, James Delgado, who does a television series called Sea Hunters.
Yeah.
And we just really, and this is all in the course of about a 5-year period. So after the Hundley, when they raised the turret from the Monitor, who did they call?
You.
Yep, the guys from Medford, Oregon again.
You know, that's a whole nother story. Yeah. Can you take me through any of these people that were on that ship? This man, as I understood it, was a northern...
He was from Connecticut, yeah.
Probably a spy.
And unfortunately, the history is denying that he existed.
Like as if somebody else carried his name tag or his
that it had been
dog tag.
That had been stolen as a dog tag, but that does not, that doesn't
jive.
Doesn't jive.
Hold water, as they say.
Typically in the Civil War, when dog tags were elective, and they were typically used just for the comfort of the people that you're leaving behind, that if you were killed in battle, they would know that you were killed in battle. And everyone says, well, if he was a spy, he wouldn't be so foolish as to wear a dog tag. Well, if you understand the Civil War, the only time they'd take their clothes off is when they were dead, because they did not shower, they did not clean, they did, I mean, if you took your clothes off, you were dead.
So it's next to his skin.
Yeah, and it's next to his skin, and that was it.
So it was pretty safe.
Yeah.
Well, now, do you know about other men that were on that ship?
Yeah, there was Arnold and Wicks, and the real key figure is Lieutenant Dixon, George Dixon.
And he's the
He
captain
was
of
the captain of the craft.
Do their families, I mean, have you had contact with their families?
We naturally have had contact with, a matter of fact, right, even Queenie's family. Queenie Bennett came to...
With a name like that, you wonder her profession, huh?
Well, she was a lovely lady. And her descendants, because there was some question about, in George Dixon's body block, he was a Mason, and he had a beautiful Masonic watch. And in back of the Masonic watch, which we x-rayed, we could see there was something behind it, but we really couldn't tell what. And there was a folded linen cloth, and in the cloth was a beautiful diamond, heavy diamond ring, and just a huge diamond brooch. And these were all treasures that we were just finding as we went into this. So naturally, those articles are priceless.
Oh.
And the family, hey, that was on George Dixon, so doesn't Dixon's lineage have rights to that?
And what's the truth?
Well, I mean, that's still being decided. They are basically saying that was a military, because it actually was in battle, and
right.
So it is a military artifact. Therefore, it takes it out of the realm of that's mine and that's yours, and so it's been basically all archived. because they were.
And where could I go see is there a museum where they?
Yes, actually, you can go see the Hundley right now. It is in conservation currently at a facility called the Lash Conservation Center, which is in North Charleston, California. North Charleston,
South Carolina?
South Carolina, thank you. Yeah.
And all this because I watched Sunday Morning Show, which had a little segment about the Hundley. And now it's yours to check it out.
Well, that's great. I don't think I've seen it. That's wonderful.
Because these details, I mean, everything from the construction of it down to these personal touch about the coin or the spy. Now, it's fascinating.
It's a great story.
What's it like to have been in your skin when you could provide the technology light years ahead of whatever they'd expected?
Well, it's actually quite an honor to have gotten into this because now it's almost become at first everyone's saying, what are you messing with this old submarine for? And now it has just evolved into project after project after project. So,
well, when I heard about it, I said, I've got to meet this man. This is fantastic. I'm thinking about those grindings from there, and what are they mixing with the grindings now that they can use that as a new rivet?
Oh, it'll be just totally reconstituted. I mean, they'll actually...
Each single rivet is numbered and put in a little bag.
And taken out and...
But this is all underwater.
Oh, no.
This is above ground now.
It's actually in a tank. The little center picture there shows it hanging in the tank.
But it is under...
And it is kept underwater because if you think of it this way, it lasted for 136 years underwater. Don't change things.
Oh, folks, stay tuned for more of this story. I'm going to learn a lot about underwater and right here in the state of Jefferson. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Bernie Martin Beck saying bye for now, but let's talk more.
Thanks, Bernie.